July 1st, 1942. An ordinary Japanese passenger ship once bound for South America sailed the Pacific, its decks packed not with tourists, but with over 1,000 Australian prisoners of war and civilians hidden below. In a tragic twist of fate, the Montevideo Maru was torpedoed by an American submarine, its identity disguised, leaving every captive lost to the depths and families desperate for answers. For 81 years, the Montevideo Maru's fate stayed buried beneath layers of wartime secrecy, bureaucracy, and heartbreak. But after decades of silence, new technology has finally uncovered what was never meant to be found. How did a commercial liner become Australia's greatest maritime disaster? And why did it take a lifetime to reveal the truth? Nagasaki, 1926. Montevideo Maru left the docks as a commercial liner, her hull built for long Pacific crossings and distant ports in South America. 7,000 tons, twin diesel engines, polished decks once meant for passengers with tickets and cargo bound for trade. War changed her purpose. The Imperial Japanese Navy took her in, stripped away civilian trappings, and pressed her into military service. By June 1942, she waited at Rabaul, a port now heavy with the detritus of battle and occupation. June 22nd, Japanese guards herded lines of prisoners across the wharf. There were 845 Australian soldiers, Lark Force No. 1 Independent Company, men who had survived the fall of Rabaul but not the occupation. Among them, 209 civilians, administrators, missionaries, traders, and bandsmen. The Salvation Army's entire Rabaul band, 22 men, joined planters, wireless operators, and the crew of the Norwegian merchant ship Herstein. Each group carried its own stories, its own fears. Some clutched letters or diaries, a last link to families far away. Photographs taken before embarkation show faces drawn with exhaustion, but in the crowd, a sense of order and mutual support endures. No Red Cross marked the hull. The ship's manifest, written in Japanese, listed prisoners as cargo, not as men. Few aboard knew their destination. Rumors swirled: forced labor, internment, perhaps repatriation. Most believed survival depended on endurance and luck. Guards counted heads, locked hatches, and the ship's engines rumbled to life. Above deck, the world remained unchanged, a merchant vessel outwardly ordinary, steaming into open water. Below, over 1,000 lives pressed together in the darkness, waiting for fate to choose its course. July 1st, 1942. In the darkness before dawn, Montevideo Maru steamed north off Luzon, her silhouette unmarked, engines pushing through the Philippine Sea. Below deck, more than 1,000 men waited, pressed into holds thick with heat. Above, Japanese guards kept watch, unaware of the silent threat closing in from beneath the waves. At 2:29 a.m., 4 torpedoes streaked from the stern tubes of USS Sturgeon. The submarine's crew worked by routine: identify, track, engage. No one aboard Sturgeon knew the ship ahead carried Allied prisoners. The target showed no Red Cross, no sign of protected status. To the periscope, she was an enemy freighter, alone and vulnerable. A torpedo struck aft, igniting the oil tanks. The blast tore through the hull. In seconds, the stern dipped, water flooding the lower decks. Montevideo Maru began to sink by the rear, dragging her bow skyward. 11 minutes. That's all it took for 7,000 tons of steel and over 1,000 souls to vanish beneath the surface. Japanese survivors later spoke of chaos: guards shouting, hatches sealed, the ship listing hard. Some prisoners trapped below found their voices. From the darkness, the hymn Auld Lang Syne rose up, sung by men facing the end together. The melody drifted across the water as the ship slipped under. Only 17 Japanese crew and guards survived, clinging to wreckage, and swept ashore days later. No Allied prisoner escaped the sinking. The sea kept it secret. On Sturgeon, the crew recorded a successful strike, unaware of the true cost. The war diary read like any other patrol report. But in the holds of Montevideo Maru, hope and memory drowned together, leaving families on distant shores to wait for news that would not come. For decades after the Montevideo Maru vanished, answers proved elusive. Wartime secrecy, bureaucratic caution, and the chaos of defeat left records scattered or locked away. Japanese transport policy offered no protection for those inside her hull. No Red Cross, no prisoner markings, just a merchant's manifest, written in kanji, tucked into a file. To Allied families, the silence was absolute. Telegrams arrived with phrases like, "missing, presumed dead," but no detail, no explanation. Grieving parents and children sent letters, pressed officials for word, formed committees that met in church halls and RSL clubs. Each year, more names were carved into local memorials, but the truth stayed hidden beneath layers of officialdom. In Tokyo, translation teams sifted through stacks of captured paperwork, searching for clues. The Japanese manifest listing prisoners as cargo remained untranslated and unshared for decades. Reports filtered out in fragments, rumors of survivors, stories of men seen on other islands, conflicting lists from Red Cross channels. Each lead faded under scrutiny. The Australian government, wary of false hope, withheld unconfirmed details. Families waited through the 1950s and 60s, their questions unanswered, their grief compounded by uncertainty. Archivists and historians took up the search. In 2012, a breakthrough. The Japanese manifest was finally authenticated and translated, confirming 1,054 names, 845 soldiers, 209 civilians. The last arguments over numbers ended, but the location of the wreck and the full story of the voyage remained out of reach. For those left behind, the absence of evidence became its own kind of torment. Only with modern technology and a new generation of researchers would the final resting place of the Montevideo Maru begin to give up its secrets. April 2023. In the South China Sea, the Fugro equator drifted above a patch of ocean deeper than the Grand Canyon. On deck, a team from Silent World Foundation and Fugro prepared their autonomous underwater vehicle, an orange cylinder bristling with sonar and cameras. The search had narrowed to a rectangle of seabed 60 nautical miles northwest of Luzon. 12 days of scanning, grid by grid, with side-scan sonar painting ghostly outlines onto monitors in the ship's control room. On April 18th, the AUV sent back a sonar image. A broken hull, unmistakable in shape and size, resting more than 4,000 meters below. The bow and stern lay apart, torn by the violence of the sinking, but undisturbed by salvage or storm. Rivets, deck fittings, the sweep of the superstructure, all match the Montevideo Maru's blueprints. Analysts, historians, and naval officers huddled around the screens, confirming what generations had only guessed. The news traveled by satellite call. In Sydney and Canberra, families who had waited decades received the message: the ship was found. For some, it was a measure of comfort. For others, a wound reopened. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called it a monumental moment, a phrase echoed by the Australian War Memorial. The site would remain untouched, a war grave. No plans for salvage, no artifacts removed. Only images and coordinates shared with those who had carried the weight of absence for so long. On the survey ship, search leader John Mullen stood silent. Years of advocacy, research, and hope had led to this hour. Among the crew, descendants of the lost wept quietly, some clutching photographs, others staring at the sonar screens in disbelief. Closure did not erase loss, but it brought the truth up from the deep. In April 2023, after 81 years beneath the Pacific, the wreck of the SS Montevideo Maru was finally located at a depth of over 4,000 meters. This discovery confirmed the fate of more than 1,050 prisoners, 845 Australian soldiers and 209 civilians, who perished when the ship was torpedoed by the USS Sturgeon on July 1, 1942. Despite decades of investigation, the full list of those lost remained uncertain until Japanese archival documents were released in 2012. Even now, some individual identities have not been conclusively matched. The wreck itself will remain undisturbed as a war grave, in accordance with international agreements and at the request of victims' families. The story of the Montevideo Maru underscores the enduring consequences of war, the challenges of historical truth, and the significance of remembering those who were lost. With the ship's discovery, families have gained long-awaited confirmation, but the tragedy's lessons and unresolved questions continue to echo through history.